Good afternoon, everyone. The Public Safety Committee will now come to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Tanier.
Present.
Alderman Aldrich.
Present.
Chair Narayan.
Here.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Keys. We have 5 present. We have a quorum.
All right. We are going to move now to excused aldermen. Alderman Oldenburg asked to be excused for a necessary absence. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to excuse Alderman Oldenburg. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Tanier.
Aye.
Alderman Aldrich. Chair Narayan.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes.
All right. With that, Alderman Oldenburg has been excused, and I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Wednesday, December 13th, 2023.
Second.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Can we do previous row?
Alderwoman Clark.
Again.
Previous row.
Been a request for previous roll?
It has to be not, Keys didn't have a chance to.
Oh, Keys, yeah, okay. So, yeah, I'll object on behalf of Keys, yeah. So, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Tanier.
Aye.
Alderman Aldrich.
Aye.
Chair Narayan.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes.
Thank you. With that, we have approved the minutes of Wednesday, December 13th. We're going to go a little bit out of order today, and we're going to move to committee discussion item number 1 on the crime practicum. We have Mr. Thomas Apt on Zoom with us today, and he hosted in part a crime practicum several weeks ago, a regional crime practicum that we saw people come from both sides of the river, basically the entire St. Louis region, to look at ways that we could combat crime in a regional fashion rather than the piecemeal fashion that we've seen historically. And I want to just lead off by apologizing to Mr. Apt. He was on the line several weeks ago, and we ran late, and he got kind of bumped from that agenda unceremoniously. And so I apologize for that, Mr. Apt. And at this time, please take it away. Thank you.
No worries about that, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. If you don't mind, I'm going to share screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So what I'd like to do today is give you a bit of a recap about the practicum on partnership-based violence that happened in December, and then talk to you about next steps and hopefully get your support for this important effort. Just to recap, the practicum on partnership-based violence was organized by the Center for the Study and Practice of Violence Reduction, which is the center that I run out of the University of Maryland at College Park. But it was hosted by Mayor Jones, Dr. Page, and the East-West Council of Governments. So I just want to point out that a very large group of elected officials and stakeholders from a wide variety of areas were very much involved. And really the VRC provided a facilitating and organizing function. So just to recap what we did over the space of just 1 week, on Monday the 4th, we brought together a large group of diverse stakeholders, representatives from impacted communities, faith-based leaders, NGO leaders, advocates, activists, law enforcement, public health, business community representatives, and others. And we brought all these people together and we discussed the benefits of a regional approach to serious violence in the region.
Mr. App, let me stop you for 1 second. I've messed something up here. I'm supposed to swear you in before you begin. So if you could just swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth to the best of your ability.
I do.
All right, please proceed. I apologize for that.
That's all right. That's all right. And so we discussed the benefits of a regional approach to this important issue of homicides and non-fatal shootings. We unveiled a regional analysis of homicides and the characteristics of those homicides. We discussed key principles for addressing those homicides and non-fatal shootings. And then we answered questions from audience members. From Tuesday through Thursday, we broke into a smaller group and learned about key anti-violence strategies from leaders all around the country who were zoomed in to give customized presentations to this group of St. Louis leaders about the leading anti-violence strategies from all across the country. And then based on that and based on the expertise of those in the room, we put together an action plan, which we're going to present to you here today. And then on the final day, Friday, we convened another large public meeting to report out on the results. Here are the working session participants who participated in the development and drafting of the action plan. As you can see, it's a very diverse group from inside the city and in surrounding counties. It includes a wide variety of folks from government and outside government. So what did we learn through primarily through the problem analysis? We learned that a relatively small number of group-involved individuals have a disproportionate contribution to violence. As you can see here, there's about 0.16 of the overall population could contribute as much as over 50% of the violence in the region. And so there's real benefits to focusing on those who are at the highest risk for becoming involved in violence, either as offenders or as victims. The other thing we learned, we did a deep dive on the characteristics of the both suspects and victims. And we learned that both were a lot older and more embedded in the criminal justice system than we expected. We looked at about 150 or so homicides over a 1-year period. And we found that the average age of victims and suspects was 31, which might be surprising for some, and it was surprising for some. And that the average total offenses for the victims and suspects was 13 previous arrests. And so what we learned is that while the issue of serious violence is often presented as an issue of youth violence, youth are actually contributing a relatively small share of the overall violence. The last thing we learned is that there's a small set of evidence-informed strategies that can make a real difference when they're properly implemented. And during the practicum, the participants were introduced to all of these strategies, about maybe 8 strategies in total. And one of the questions was, which of these strategies makes sense for the region, and how could we pull something together that aligns and leverages multiple strategies at the same time while being feasible and implementable? So we went from right there. We were very much aware of the region's long history with many different planning efforts. So we were intensely focused on creating something that could be acted upon immediately. So we recommended a new regional strategy for addressing violence. This working group recommended that. And they also recommended a collaborative effort to drive that strategy forward. Goal would be to reduce homicides and shootings by 20% over 3 years. And the way to do that would be to engage those at the highest risk for violence, working to keep them alive, safe, and free while holding those who persist in serious violence fully accountable. We had three major strategic components to the action plan. The first was a focused deterrent strategy. And as you can see from these quotes, this is one of the most evidence-based strategies in the country today. It's been endorsed by the Campbell Collaboration, the National Academies of Science, the U.S. Agency for International Development, and others. The core elements of the focused deterrent strategy are mobilizing the moral voice of the community, providing clear information about risk, offering unconditional support, using direct sustained outreach to high-risk individuals and groups, and then following up with supports, with promises of supports and accountability, and then of course assessing and evaluating as you go. What does that mean in plain English? What it means is you get a group of law enforcement officials, community residents, and service providers together. You identify those who are at the highest risk for violence, and then that partnership directly engages those folks. And you have a very simple message. You say, look, we know you're involved in the violence. It has to stop. If it stops, we're willing to help you. And if it doesn't stop, we have to stop you. And then you follow up on those promises of supports and those promises of sanctions. For those who are willing to, lay down the guns and work to start changing their lives, there are high quality services available. For those who persist in violence, there's targeted enforcement action to remove them from the community that they're hurting. Focused Deterrence is a collaborative violence reduction strategy. It features relentless support and outreach, as well as strategic and legitimate use of law enforcement. And as I said, it leverages the moral authority of the community. It is not a police-led strategy that is just about arrest, prosecution, and incarceration. Here are just a very quick summary of some of the results. There a meta review or a systematic review of the focused deterrence strategy identified 25 separate tests of the strategy. And in 25 of those tests, it had significant crime reductions in 22 of those 25. And this is just a sampling. So you can see in Indianapolis, they had a 34% reduction in homicides. In Stockton, a 42% reduction. In New Haven, a 37% reduction. In Chicago, a 32% reduction in shooting victimization. And in Philadelphia, you had a 43% reduction in shootings. And in Baltimore, a 33% reduction in shootings. These are very big numbers, and very few interventions can credibly deliver such numbers. But that's not enough. We recognize that sometimes people view this focused deterrent strategy as all stick and no carrot. And so we wanted to be very sure that we were approaching these high-risk individuals and groups with a balance of accountability, but also empathy and also supports. And so one of the ways we did this is by intentionally supporting this effort with cognitive behavioral theory and influence strategies. If you don't know what CBT is a very practical way of intensely engaging with people to help them identify problematic thinking and change problematic behavior. And it's been very successful in interventions with high-risk individuals. So, and as you can see, it's been endorsed here by the Violent Crime Working Group at the Council on Criminal Justice and by the very prestigious J-PAL Poverty Action Lab. Again, another quick summary of results. In Chicago, in 2023, there was a 65% reduction in shootings and homicide arrests that was associated with Ready Chicago. In 2021, associated with the Becoming a Man initiative, there was a 50% reduction in violent crime arrests. In Chelsea, Massachusetts, ROCA Inc. was able to reduce recidivism by 42 to 46%. And then again, ROCA in Baltimore, its current participants, 87% of them had been arrested in the past, but 72% of them were not arrested during the 2 years that they were with the program, and 94% of them were not incarcerated during that time. So again, these are strong results. The last aspect is street outreach. And the reason that we believe street outreach is important is because we're talking about trying to engage some of the most difficult to reach people in these jurisdictions, in the county, in the city, in East St. Louis. And we need to make special efforts to engage them, to get them the supports and services that they may need. And we need to do so even if they initially reject those services. We need to keep engaging them, and so the Practicum Working Group recommended also employing street outreach workers to ensure that these services that are going to be provided get to those who need them most. So how are we going to push this forward? Well, the working group thought a lot about this and recommended the creation of a new regional violence hub to support these strategies. This hub would bring together key stakeholders from inside and outside government, especially from impacted communities, to push this work forward. The East-West Council of Governments, which hosted the Practicum, has tentatively agreed to seek approval for its board to help start this collaborative, and I believe they may be taking a formal vote soon to see whether they're going to make their resources available. The Greater St. Louis Inc., the Municipal League, and the Regional Business Council have all tentatively agreed to provide financial support for this initiative, and we at the VRC have pledged our ongoing support as well. What does this regional hub mean? What would this do? This is a collaborative effort that would basically provide technical assistance and logistical support. All of the sort of glue functions that you need to keep a collaborative effort moving. You need someone to help convene the meetings, to send the emails, to make sure that everybody's talking to one another, to engage outside experts in training and technical assistance, and to track and analyze, and most importantly, share key data. And if we need more activities, we can add them. But the idea is not to substitute for all the important work that's happening in the city or in the county or in other parts of the region, but instead to supplement it with this hub that is connecting people together more organically. What are the next steps? The next steps were to memorialize these strategies in a draft action plan. That's been done, and if we haven't sent that to you, we can make sure that you receive that draft action plan today, and so that you can review it and provide feedback to us at your convenience. We also have launched a startup implementation team, people to start taking the first tentative steps towards putting this plan into action. That's already done. We've met once. We are in the process of taking this draft action plan that we have created and getting feedback from important and critical elected officials like yourselves, other stakeholders, because we want to make sure that we have a much broader group of people who have been able to be involved and offer feedback before we finalize this work. We've started to put together this regional anti-violence hub. It's very early, and of course, we still need that approval vote from the East-West Gateway Council of Governments. It's looking very good, but I don't want to prejudge that. And then what we want to do ultimately is launch a regional advisory board, which will have a broad representation from across the region to provide sort of high-level oversight for this work. And we welcome all of you to participate in that advisory board. And then once we have that board established, once we finalize that plan, we can get started on implementation aggressively, and we can hopefully have boots on the ground, our first participants engaged in or around October of this year. I want to be sensitive to people's time, and I want to leave time for questions, so I'll stop there. But we really hope that you fully support this effort, and we welcome your partnership and your support and your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Apt. Serena Mohammed from the administration is also going to speak on this practicum, and I hope you can stick around for a few minutes because I'd like to open it up for questions for both you, Mr. Apt, and Ms. Mohammed after she's done speaking on the subject. Is that all right with you?
I'll stay for as long as I can, yes.
All right. Well, thank you. And Ms. Mohammed, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability? All right. Please proceed.
My remarks will be Serena Mohammed with the St. Louis Mental Health Board. We were actually included is that better? Serena Mohammed with the St. Louis Mental Health Board, and we participated in the practicum. And I just wanted to offer that one of the things that we did through the St. Louis Area Violence Prevention Commission was look at the plans that have been done over the past decade for the city of St. Louis. And the recommendations that you just heard were included in those plans. So it's consistent with what community has asked for. It's also consistent with what we learned from the Department of Justice when they did a plan for the city of St. Louis. It's consistent with the community health improvement plan that's been done by the health departments in the city and county. So we feel like this is on the right path. And we're also optimistic that it has broad regional support. Folks were fully engaged and participating during the practicum, and there seems to be an understanding that we have to work on this issue collectively and that it can't be a siloed approach. So I was a participant. I also work on this issue, and I'm just here to offer support and to also answer any questions if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mohammed. And with that, I will open it up to the committee for questions of either, and we will start with Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Apt, and of course, my sister, Ms. Mohammed, for always being present and giving her feedback, her support adds a lot of value for me personally as well as in the community and regionally. So thank you for the work that you continue to do. This is a great presentation. I look forward. I'm glad that it was captured this way in committee, so we'll be able to share it right with our constituency bases, and they'll be able to see the work that came out of this a lot more than what they just read in the headlines, right? And so this is good. I only had a question about the Mr. Apt, about the advisory board. Can you go a little bit more detail into that? What it's going to look like? What is there an application process, or how we can so that we can share if we want to be involved or if our constituents want to be involved?
Sure. So, our tentative thoughts about the oversight board is that it's going to be a fairly large group, so that those who want to participate most likely can. We're going to try to make sure that there's representation from all relevant stakeholder groups, both in the city and across the region. And we're hoping to sort of have it recognizing that, people's time is short. We'll probably have quarterly meetings so that the board can oversee, the implementation of the strategy, learn about early results, problem solve about early challenges. And also, we anticipate that, there may be additional efforts as we go, and the strategy may evolve. And so we're open to ideas there. So the idea is hopefully to convene the first meeting of the board in April, and then quarterly thereafter. I hope that's good information.
So essentially, we just sign up ourselves, just volunteer and sign up ourselves?
We'll need to create some type of process, but
Okay.
we will be sure to make sure that the board has every opportunity to participate.
Okay.
You can be sure of it.
Okay, and then large group. So what do you think, just in case somebody asks, you think it'll probably be an in-person commitment or maybe a virtual commitment for the quarterly meetings, or we got to wait till we get closer in to see about that?
I don't know. The two chairs of the board, both Mayor Jones and Dr. Page have already agreed to chair these meetings, and I don't want to get out ahead of them. And so, I would be surprised if there wasn't a virtual and in-person option because we want to be as inclusive as possible. But ultimately, it will be their call.
Okay, thank you. I'll be looking forward to that information again to be able to not only participate myself, share, and please count me in on any efforts to get this narrative and get this information out in the community as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Alderwoman Keys, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here, Mr. App and Ms. Muhammad. All great information. So I look forward to hearing more about this as time goes on. Again, thank you so much. Great presentation. So it sounds like it may be very beneficial to us as a city to have this. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, moving along, Alderwoman Velasquez.
Great, thank you. And just want to thank Mr. and Ms. Muhammad as well for speaking today. Just a quick question. I think we're all kind of, us fascinated by the advisory board. Are there going to be any spots for, I mean, it's regional, so are you going to make sure, are we going to make sure that there's somebody from each of the, obviously the city and the county, but you had folks from St. Charles in the working groups. Are there sort of other target areas that you're going to make sure that are going to be on the advisory board too, not just in addition to city, county? Are there like spots that should be filled with certain roles, I guess, or certain expertise?
I think we're going to try to make sure that there's, governmental representation, non-governmental representation, folks from the enforcement side, folks from the community side, to really be balanced in all aspects and to have all counties represented. I would just point out that that the oversight of this is really the oversight of the regional hub, meaning this is to give oversight to this sort of facilitation effort. But I just we were very careful to make sure that this effort is really a coordination effort. It's not going to disturb any of the authorities that each individual county or the city has. And it's going to supplement that work, not substitute it, not substitute for it, not replace it, and not manage it. So that's really the purpose of this, but we will try to make sure that every voice can be heard on the advisory board.
Great. I have no other questions.
All right, Alderwoman Sonier.
Thank you. Just thank you for all of your work on this issue. I don't really have, any questions, but I certainly have seen, I think especially recently, we've had a number of issues in our region, and particularly where Black women have been dealing with domestic violence and and have been murdered and harmed by it. And I'm so glad to see that the approach involves more than just policing per se, because in these cases, all of those women called the police, filed restraining orders. They tried to use everything available to them within the criminal justice system and still ended up murdered. So I think there's clear evidence for the fact that we need to expand this to getting to, much of what you're discussing of people's, how they're processing things mentally, involving community and widening those efforts, because right now it's just not working. So I don't really have any questions. I'm just really excited to see this work happening. Thank you, Ms. Muhammad, and the mayor and the mayor's office for you guys' work on it, and whatever I can do to be of support, whatever you guys want to make sure is shared with the community in any way that I can be helpful, you can count me down. Thank you.
Alderman Aldridge. Alderman Aldridge, please proceed.
Thank you just to all people that was involved in this process. I know it was a lot of hard work. No questions.
All right. With that, I just want to thank you, Mr. Apt, for both coming to town here and being a part of this practicum, as well as presenting here today. For any who are interested in this, I know you can't plug yourself this way, but I can. There's a fantastic book written by Mr. Apt called Bleeding Out that really encompasses a lot of the work that we're going over here today. I think everyone in the room will be very familiar with the first half of the book, which is kind of where a lot of urban areas in the United States are right now. But the second half of the book is how we come together and really work as regionally to prevent crime, particularly violent crime. And it's a fantastic read that I think anyone who is in this space should definitely check out. And it was really cool to hear you both at the practicum and here to see that move from the pages of a book into real life in a room was a real neat opportunity, and I thank you for that. And as many of my colleagues have pointed out, I'll certainly be interested to see how this process moves forward. And looks like my colleague has one more thing to say.
I am so sorry, Mr. I kept looking at you, and now I know when you said that, Sharon and Ryan, we met in 2019 in the KMOX studios. I don't know if you remember me, but we met. I have the book. You signed my book, and we took pictures. I kept trying to make the connection. So good to see you again now, and thank you for this continued work. Absolutely.
Great, but yeah, I look forward to working with you on this as we move forward and helping to tackle some of these issues. I've seen your work in other cities, and I'm glad that we're next on your list to put some time in on.
Thank you so much. I've been incredibly impressed by the reception in the region and by all of the commitment and talent and insight, and I'm really excited for next steps. Thank you.
And also thank you, Ms. Muhammad, for your time today as well. And with that, we are going to move. Do we have Woman Boyd on the call?
Yes, sir. Your mic sound like it's crackled.
So did you, I'm hearing conflicting things here on what you would like to do with Board Bill 96. Would you like to discuss Board Bill 96 today?
Yes.
Okay.
I would, sir.
Okay, well then we will move to that now. Alderwoman, please proceed.
Okay, thank you, committee, for hearing this bill. It's been pretty interesting. I want to thank Alderman Ryan for giving me his legal advice from his perspective. I have talked to the mayor's office in regards to this. I'm gonna have Celeste from the mayor's office come in and speak in regards to this. We're not gonna ask for a vote on this today because there's some pieces to this that we need to add to improve it. And so we're excited about some news that we have. So if you would not mind, I would allow Celeste to come up to speak for me.
Casey.
By Celeste, do you mean Casey, just to be clear? We don't have a ringer here.
I mean, Casey, I told her, I said, I'm horrible on names, but she know who I'm talking about. Casey.
If you could turn on your microphone so you get the green light.
There we go.
And then if you could just swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability.
Yes, I do. My name is Casey Milberg, for the record, from the mayor's office, and I solemnly swear.
Please proceed.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much to Alderwoman Boyd for championing this important piece of legislation. Blair's Law is pending state legislation that would create the new offense of unlawful discharge of a firearm if, with criminal negligence, there's discharge of a firearm within or into the limits of a municipality. Currently, state law prohibits the discharge of weapons into and within certain distances of certain kinds of buildings in certain locations. And Blair's Law would provide law enforcement with more tools to address the discharge of firearms into the air, such as with celebratory gunfire, which is a significant issue within our city. It is pending legislation, so this legislation would need to be updated with trigger language, providing that it would only take effect upon the state legislation being signed and passed and signed by the legislature and the governor. For what it is worth, this legislation did pass the state legislature last year. The governor vetoed it as part of a much broader public safety omnibus bill. He had issues with other portions of the bill, but in his veto message specifically noted that he did want to see Blair's Law be enacted into law. The legislation so far has been heard in the House. It has been voted do pass out of the Senate. The relevant Senate committee, which if you're following the dysfunction in the Missouri Senate, you'll know that that is no small sign of support for this bill. There is a lot of appetite to get it passed. And for what it's worth, I do think it's important to note that it is named after 11-year-old Blair Michaela Shanahan Lane, who was killed on July 4th, 2011 in Kansas City in front of her family due to individuals' choice to shoot a gun into the air for celebratory gunfire purposes. The city did submit testimony in support of Blair's Law at the state level. Included in that testimony, we did make sure to note that while the city has seen a significant reduction in homicides, it does not lessen the urgency to save lives. I think anybody who spent a 4th of July or New Year's Eve in the city of St. Louis has likely heard the celebratory gunfire that happens on those nights, and it does not happen without consequence. We know that this year, for example, for New Year's, the police department recorded 501 shots fired from December 31st to 2 a.m. on the 1st of January. The previous year, that number stood at 324. So there is certainly enough demonstration of the need for this in the city of St. Louis. And the intent of this legislation would be to position the city to begin implementing it immediately were it to pass at the state level and be signed by the governor. There are a few portions of the legislation that would need to be tweaked slightly. So one example being just inserting in that trigger language into the effective clause at the very end of the legislation. Additionally, in Section 3, it currently provides for penalty provisions. There's some build out for penalties with juveniles. We have been talking with the city attorney, and they have advised us that we probably need to modify that language to afford the juvenile courts the appropriate discretion that state law does say that they are entitled to. So that would need to be a change that would need to be made there. And likely an additional change that we want to make just for nitpicky I-dotting T-crossing details to make sure it exactly reflects what's in the legislation that's going to be passed. You'll see within the Section 1, there's that language that says within a quarter mile of an occupied structure. That originally comes from subsection 3 of Section 2. That was originally tacked on at the end of the sentence. There's language in the state statute that says nothing shall prevent adopting an that affects all this within 1/4 mile of an occupied structure. So likely bringing that back down so it exactly mirrors what state statute says. And I would also draw your attention to subsection 8 that also serves as a bit of a parameter regulating guidance for this legislation that says this Blair's Law legislation, unlawful discharge of a weapon, would apply, but it should not apply if the firearm is discharged more than 1 mile from any occupied structure. So do want to be front with folks about that and make sure that that is known. Like I said, it's something that the mayor feels strongly about. I know that in general there are a lot of folks who have talked with us on the board about their strong support for this, especially given celebratory gunfire in the city. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, and I'm sure the Alderwoman would as well.
Thank you for that, Casey. I'll just go down the committee. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
No questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Keys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My internet, I guess, is a little spotty where I am. But yeah, thank you, Alderwoman Boyd. This has been a long-standing tradition in our city. And, I can remember as a child, my mother having us to sleep on the floor on, New Year's night, because it's the amazing amount of gunfire. You wouldn't even think that you were living in a civilized country. And so I am happy to see this legislation be brought forth. I can remember the level of fear that I experienced as a child, having to have your sleep pattern disrupted because you got to sleep on the floor because there's so many people discharging weapons in our city. I'm always concerned about, this gunfire overall detracts from our great city. So thank you again, Alderwoman Boyd, for bringing forth this legislation. Thank you.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alderwoman Boyd, filing this bill. Just a quick question, Ms. Milberg, and thank you for presenting. As you mentioned, there's some interesting things happening in the Missouri Senate. So just hypothetically, if a Blair's Law passed at the state and then this became a trigger ordinance, and there happened to be a duel between two senators here in city property, in the city, and somebody shot celebratory gunfire, would that still, or shot gunfire before or after said duel?
Sure. If it is within 1 mile of an occupied structure within the city, then yes, this law would apply.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
I enjoy the line of questioning there. Alderwoman Saunier.
Thank you. No questions at this time.
Vice Chair Aldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Alderwoman Boyd, for bringing the legislation forward, as well as Ms. Milbrook. I don't know the exact title, outside of being extraordinary, awesome. I'm really excited about this piece of legislation, as me and you know, coming from our Jeff City days, and I know State Representative right now who has this bill and has been working on it since me and him went into the legislature in 2019. Mark Sharp from the Kansas City area has been working hard to get this passed. It's been one of his priority pieces from day one. He almost got it finished this last session, but it was wrapped in some other bills, and we know how those omnibus bills go in its last few days of session. But I think this is a great piece of legislation, even though it's trigger language. I'm very positive that it will get done this session, depending on if the Senate keeps blowing up. But I know he's going to work diligently to make sure it gets done, and I think this would be a huge benefit. And I know you've worked on this as well, a huge benefit for the city of St. Louis. So I look forward to the few edits being made before potentially signing on as a co-sponsor, but look forward to also this board getting this done. So thank you. Thank the Alderwoman, and also I want to thank State Representative Mark Sharp for all the hard work he's done to start the conversation here.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I don't have any questions. I think that basically everyone in the city, whether they own firearms or not, should be a proponent of this bill. I think there is no reasonable responsible firearm owner that I know thinks it's a good idea to discharge a firearm into the air in a celebratory fashion in an urban environment. So I'm glad that we're working out the technical details here to make sure that this is going to be an enforceable law when it makes it to the mayor's desk. And as soon as you have it in the form that you would like it to be in, we'll have a hearing on it and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. At this point, the only, at this point, we're going to take up Board Bill number 200.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Madam Clerk, can you read the summary for Board Bill 200, please?
Board Bill number 200, introduced by Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard, January 12th, 2024. The board bill is recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing the Department of Public Safety to accept 2023 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant Award of up to $456,683 from the U.S. Department of Justice for the purpose of providing funding assistance with the Night Watch Program, Problem Properties Program, and St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department Homicide Analyst Program, appropriating such funds to the Department of Public Safety, authorizing the expenditure of such funds to the extent received and containing an emergency clause.
Thank you. This is a grant that we legislate every year, and I'm proud to have been able to continue carrying this. It has been approved through our Board of VNA, and with me, once again, Ms. Casey Milberg, who can give a little background on how these funds are spent and continue to be spent, and hopefully get your support in Board Bill 200.
All right, Ms. Milberg, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give on Board Bill 200 is true to the best of your ability?
I do, yes.
All right, please proceed.
Great. Hello again. As Alderwoman Clark Hubbard just explained, this is a grant that we get from the United States Department of Justice. It's called the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program. And the general purpose of this is to allow state and local governments to support a broad range of activities to prevent and address and mitigate crime and to improve the criminal justice system in general. We have been very fortunate to continue to receive these grants for a number of years. And to go into a little bit more detail about what this grant would be used for, a portion of the funds would be used for the city's Night Watch program. And that program monitors curfew violations for juveniles who've been adjudicated in family court cases. So this is court-ordered curfew of juveniles, and what happens is there are random visits to homes during curfew hours to check on their curfew compliance. It's a deterrence program that has proven effective. It's a partnership between the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department as well as the Juvenile Division of the St. Louis City Family Court. There's one team comprised of a police officer and a deputy juvenile officer, and those are the individuals who make the random home visits just to verify that juveniles are home in accordance with their court-imposed curfews. And again, the goal is to deter curfew violations and the process reduce not just recidivism, but also the victimization that we also see of juvenile probationers. And if there is found to be noncompliance, the sanctions, do apply. So it's not just a checking, there are consequences if there's noncompliance. So that's one of the areas that would be funded by this grant program. The next, as mentioned, is the SLMPD's Homicide Analyst Program. And that is really a group of individuals at the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department who comb through evidence, try to put it together to help solve homicide cases. And we ended 2023 as a city with a 75% homicide clearance rate, which is about 20 percentage points higher than the national average. Clearance rate means a case broadly has been resolved, and that is perhaps the most critical metric for measuring a police department's success at crime solving, because it shows the public how police departments and how prosecutors respond to crime. So this would, again, just be additional funding to support that work. We really are very encouraged by the results we've seen last year. So this would just further support the good work that's being done there. And then, of course, as mentioned, the final portion of these funds would go to the Problem Property Attorneys Program. And we, of course, have significant numbers of problem properties within the city. This specifically goes to the attorneys who, to help them try to mitigate issues at the initial outset with problem property owners, help it from getting to a point where there may need to be litigation, but then also if it does get to the point clearly prosecution is needed, then to enable them to prosecute those owners who are clearly not in compliance with the nuisance laws that we have in effect in the city. So that is the high-level summary of what these funds would be used for, and happy to take any questions from the committee.
All right, thank you. And Madam Clerk, will you please add me as a co-sponsor to Board Bill number 200?
Noted.
All right, and now we will go down the list. Alderwoman Keys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like to be added as a co-sponsor on this bill. Thank you so much, Ms. Milberg and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. I'm very pleased to hear that some funds will be coming to help to support these various programs that will definitely benefit our city. Thank you.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
No questions for me. Thank you.
Alderwoman Saunier.
Thank you for your work on this, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and Director Milberg. May I also be added as a co-sponsor?
Noted.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Aldridge.
I'd like to make a motion that, before I speak, that we embank this
Sure.
bill.
I'll second that. All right. It's been a motion and a second. And all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. With that.
Mr. Chair, I wasn't done. That was just a motion.
Yeah, I was just saying that it's now in bank.
Oh, okay.
and please proceed, Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Millbrook. Thank you, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and the Mayor's Office for finding this grant. Also echo the words from Alderwoman Keys. You know, I think this would be hugely important. I know the administration, our police department, but I also want to uplift also community members have worked very hard to get our crime down, the lowest that it's ever been. And I think this will just be another asset to trying to reduce crime in the city of St. Louis. So I appreciate the Alderwoman's continuous leadership on issues like this, as well as the mayor. So thank you, guys.
And I'd just like to echo that. Thank you for your work on this, both of you. Hopefully these funds can help us out. And are you looking to pass this out today? So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to pass Board Bill number 200 out with a due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we got moved by Velasquez, seconded by Aldridge. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Saunier.
Aye.
Alderman Aldred.
Aye.
Chair Narayan.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes.
All right, with that, we have passed Board Bill number 200 out with a due pass recommendation. At this point, we're going to be taking up both Board Bill number 144 and 146, which I am a sponsor of. So I'm going to hand the chairmanship over to Vice Chair Aldridge.
All right, Alderman Ryan, you may proceed. Assuming you want to start with Board Bill 144 first.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yeah, so I'd like to start with Board Bill 144. And before we go any further, now that we do have 144 properly in front of us, there is amendment number 1 to Board Bill number 144 that is both in your in the drive. I'm not sure if it's on the desks in front of you or if it's just sitting right over here, but I can either give you or do you have it in front of you?
It's in front of us.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this is a one-word amendment. There's essentially a Scrivener's error here, but I wanted in a abundance of caution make sure that we brought an amendment to it. So basically what we're doing, we're going to add the word grandfathered in on page 2, line 17. So following the word A, we're going to insert the word grandfathered. I would ask that we adopt this amendment.
All right. The Alderman has made a motion to adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 140 or 144. Is there a second? Seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
I'm sorry, who was the first? I couldn't hear. Was it?
Alderman Ryan made the motion and I seconded.
Well, let me pull that back. I would like to make a motion to adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 144.
Moved. Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Odenberg. I'm sorry, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Aye. Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Aye. Alderwoman Sanye,
Aye.
Alderman Aldred,
Aye.
Chair Narayan.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes.
By your vote, you have sustained the motion. Alderman, you may proceed.
All right, now we have Board Bill 144 as amended in front of us. Today, I'd like to just briefly discuss this, and then I know that we have Paul Payne here with the administration, as well as some folks from the retirement plan, and that both want to discuss this. And so I'd ask that we just hear from all of them. Board Bill 144 as amended is really just it's a bill about fundamental fairness. Right now, there's 38 firefighters who joined up before they were 25 years old. And right now, to get normal retirement benefits, you have to be 55 years old and have 30 years of service. So right now, what we're doing essentially is if someone joined the fire department when they were 21 years old, 22 years old, and they've been running into burning buildings for the last 30 years of their lives, and they want to retire, we say, no, either continue to run into these burning buildings for another 5 years, or else we're going to penalize you on your retirement. I think that is insane. This affects 38 people right now. We can fix this. This is an oversight, I believe, when they initially drafted this. I don't think that they meant to catch people up like this, but I think if you've put 30 years in fighting fires for the city of St. Louis and you'd like to retire, I think that you should be able to without a hit to your pension, and that hit isn't just for those couple years, that's indefinitely. I'll also add that they do not accrue additional benefits for those years after 30 years that they serve. So it's not like in the normal city pension system, there's the drop program, which if someone chooses not to retire after 30 years, they accrue additional benefits for their service, because sometimes we do realize that there's institutional knowledge that we would like to keep on after their 30 years of service. But they're accruing additional benefits for that additional time they're serving the city. In this instance, these firefighters are not doing that. And before I make everyone behind me in the room mad, I did ask, okay, so once someone's been with the fire department for 30 years, are they actually fighting fires now, or are these guys sitting behind desks? And they just about all jumped on top of me and started beating me up. They are actively going into fires the entire time. They don't sit behind a desk somewhere after they get 10, 15 years on. So these are people who have been putting their body on the line for 30 years, and we're asking them to do it for just a few more years before you get the benefits because they started doing it too early. That's just fundamentally unfair, and we have the ability to fix it, and I think that we should. There's a finite number of people that this affects right now. That's why we needed that grandfathered amendment. We know now, as we recruit younger firefighters, that we're going to run into this issue again, but we have several years now to address that before we have the next wave of individuals that's going to fall into this kind of gap. And I absolutely think that we should. The only reason that I don't think that we can do it with this is that we need an additional cost study to be done. And right now there's already one individual who's in this hole right now who should be retired if they want to, or should be accruing additional benefits, who has to continue to show up to work every day and fight fires. And I just can't sleep at night with the idea that if that person wants to retire, and if something was to happen to any of these individuals after they get that 30 years of service and they want to be sitting at a lake house somewhere, I mean, ultimately that's on us for not fixing this. So with that, I know Mr. Payne wants to discuss this, and I know the folks with the the firefighters plan want to discuss this. So if we could please hear from them.
All right. Unless you want somebody to come up personally testify on the bill, I'll just have the clerk do for or against or informational purposes. Is that okay? Okay. Madam Clerk, is there anybody here to speak in favor of the bill?
I have Mr. Dan Clark, Local 73. He's speaking on Board Bill 144 and 146.
Okay. If Mr. Clark, you want to speak on 144, since that's in front of us, we will give you 3 minutes.
Okay.
Whenever. Yeah. Madam Clerk, could you swear Mr. Dan Clark?
Mr. Clark, could you please raise your right hand for me? Do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
All right.
I wanted to start off to give my deepest condolences to Aldridge for the death of your mother passing.
Mr. Clark, could you please speak into
sorry.
the microphone?
I got to get to the microphone. My condolences to the Aldridge family, to you and your family. Thank you to the committee for allowing me to speak in favor of Board Bill 144. It does, as Alderman Narayan has mentioned, it does affect 38 people. We had our first individual affected in June of last year. Right now, that individual has to work, I believe, about 2 years paying 9% into a system that's going to go nowhere because he came on the job too early. Whether he wants to retire or whether he wants to get into the drop, he has to make that determination whether he wants to take a large reduction in pension benefits or if he wants to just work longer. Somebody like myself, I came on when I was 27 years old, so this won't affect me. Him and I will get the same benefit. He'll have to work longer. So that to us, it is quite unfair, and it's a hardship that's been put on those members. Again, it is only 38, so there is a cost study out there that I believe was done in 2021. It's a pretty minimal cost to make these individuals whole, and as far as I know, those are the only members in the city out of any of the pension systems that are dealing with something like this. That's all I have. I would entertain any questions if anyone has them.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Thank you.
Do any committee members have any questions for Mr. Clark? I will start in seniority. Alderwoman Shameen Clark-Hubbard. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Saunier.
I was going to say no questions. I would like to hear from Mr. Payne and then ask questions at the same time.
Yeah. If that's okay with you, Mr. Chair. Okay. No problem. Thank you, Mr. Clark, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. Payne, our budget director for the city of St. Louis, that keep all our money tight and right.
Yes. Hello, Alderman and members of the committee. Hi. Actually, I've got some prepared remarks, but it was mostly on 146 and not 144, so I don't know what the protocols are on that, but I could share thoughts on 144 as well. First and foremost, on any change in an actuarial benefit, you need a study. And I know that there was something included with the bill, but that's not, it's supposed to be current, it's supposed to be based on the most recent actuarial study. You talk to the actuary, they're going to say that's not valid. So that needs to be updated before you can finally act on any proposed change in benefit. I mean, that's the protocol, and that's a state statute that applies to all systems. So that has to be done. And I've in thinking about these, and I know this one has been on the back burner for a while, and I've actually had some ideas too that I'd like to be able to propose as well on some things that might be beneficial to the members and no cost to the system that I think could be a focus of discussion in trying to come to some final bill that would represent whatever, I think, some consensus on what we want to do in terms of 144. And then there's also, it's funny because I just came across the street. We were just at the meeting over there because they were presenting the actuarial evaluation just now. And there's also some administrative changes regarding the amortization of costs and such, which need to be also worked in. And I'd be more than happy to sit in and participate in that, because I think those are some things we also need to address in that system. But right now, just even without talking about the substance, we need to have an actuarial study on that proposed benefit, and it needs to be correct, and it needs to be based on the most recent actuarial evaluation. That's on 144. I didn't know if you want me to go into 146 or.
Yeah, I think we'll have you wait on 146 since we'll bring that back up. But did any members of the committee starting seniority have, and I also apologize, I forgot Ms. Keys for the person speaking in favor. Is there any members starting in seniority that may have any questions for the director, starting with Alderwoman Clark Hubbard?
I guess I just would like to know responsibility to do that. Is it the board's, the actuary study? Is it?
Well, usually it's whoever proposes. Now, the FRP board did, as you have, I think it was attached with the bill, did do a study, I think in 2019, something like that. So, I mean, it could be done again, but that would be up to the board. Usually when there's a study that's from an outside source, the question then becomes, well, who's paying for this study? You know, and that may be an issue. I don't know. But as you can tell from 2019, it was the FRP board that approved.
All right, Alderwoman Keys, do you have any questions?
I'm going to listen a bit more before I may have some questions. Thank you.
No problem. Alderwoman Velasquez.
And this is regarding the study too. So if there is a actuarial cost study presented with the bill, will your office also want to have, not comment on it, but create your own? I mean,
No. Typically, when you have a pension bill that affects benefits, that the cost of that is determined by the actuary, because actuarial science has been doing it a long time, but I learn stuff every day on this. It's just that it's a complicated calculation. They take in all sorts of factors, returns of the system, mortality rates, age, pay, all that, and they do a calculation based on, here's what we anticipate the impact of this change would be on this population of members that you're considering to change, and then we estimate that the impact will be this much on your liabilities, and this will have this much impact on your contribution, and that's what they do.
Right. I guess I'm asking if we get that, will your office will you want to create another one? Maybe I'm asking, would you want to do another analysis?
I guess what I was sort of indicating was that I would like to, I mean, if I were going to ask the actuary for something like that, I would also want to consider some other things as well, because I had some thoughts on some other changes. But I think that has to come through the process.
Great, thank you.
Alderwoman Sonia.
Thank you. First, thank you for your work on this, Alderman Narayan, and Dan Clark and the rest of 173. Also, I want to shout out my good resident in the Gate District, firefighter that's watching and emailed me some questions. I guess, so my question is just really around the timeline of it. Like, what is the timeline of it? How long does it typically take for that kind of study? Because my understanding is that there's interest in moving on this in the near future. So is there a typical timeline of these studies, or how long does that take?
Well, my understanding is it depends on what they actually determine. And if there's a certain threshold of what the cost is, then you definitely can't approve the benefit without the study being posted and publicized and all that. Off the top of my head, I don't want to lead you astray. That takes a bit. But if it's small enough, then you don't have that same time requirement. But you're never going to know that until you actually get the cost calculated. And I think you'll know that pretty soon when you get that.
And have yourself and the bill sponsor been in conversation about some of your suggested changes, or is this kind of the first time that you're mentioning some of your suggested changes?
I think there's been, I haven't been in any discussions directly, but I think there's been overtures back and forth, but I can't speak to the details.
Alderman Narayan, do you have a timeline for you know, like if a study is necessary or all these things, were you aware that there was another study needed? Do you have a timeline in mind for how you were hoping to move this?
So I think it's important to note here that the courts have recently spoken on exactly this issue. There was a teachers union case that went through the Eastern District, which is where we sit in the state, the Eastern District of Missouri, that said that changing the age at which an individual is eligible for retirement is not actually an additional benefit. The state law that would trigger the need for the study would be adding an additional benefit. So there's a case directly on point from our appeals court that says that no additional study is necessary for this. I want to also remind folks that we're just talking about 38 individuals. So we're talking about 38 individuals with a maximum of 5 years of additional pay. So we have a finite number here. We're only doing this for grandfathered members. That was the reason for that amendment, because we're not actually just opening up some huge can of worms here with just an infinite number of potential payees out there. We know exactly how much this is going to cost. We had the numbers put together for this bill. This bill went through. The mayor ended up vetoing it. We were poised to override that veto, and there wasn't. The people weren't present in order to make that vote. I know that that's before some of the newer members here. That's when we were 28, not 14. But this isn't like ancient history. This study is it was on point when Alderman Oldenburg was carrying this bill, and nothing really has changed in the meantime. We haven't added on additional that are kind of falling into this hole, as I'll call it. We know the number of individuals. It's 38 individuals, and I think, like I said, I think it's just a fundamental fairness issue, and I think the courts have spoken on it.
I don't know who's best for this question. I'm just curious about, given the veto from the mayor's office last time, can you talk a little bit, especially for people at home, about what that communication is like, as far as like, you know, have there been conversations with the mayor's office and also with 173 about, you know, working on something that everyone can come to consensus to, or just what that communication has been like?
So I know that 73 and the mayor's office have been in conversations on this through Nancy Cross, I believe, is the person who's kind of been spearheading some of those conversations. Dan may be in a better position than I am to address where those conversations are. I try pretty hard to not get in the middle of conversations with the administration and any labor organization. I don't feel like that's appropriate in my role.
Is Dan able to speak to that?
I am, if you allow.
Thank you.
So to clear up, and I think we're a little confused on Board Bill 144. 144 has never been brought up before, so it hasn't been vetoed before. That was 146. To speak on, yeah, they're confusing. And their numbers are very close, so it's confusing. I know. To speak on what the director said. You know, he said there's state statutes that, you know, protect things, or we need cost studies for that. This pension system isn't state controlled. It's local control. We're not trying to change that. Even with Board Bill 146, this is local controlled. We have members being harmed right now. There is a cost study that was done, and again, if I was wrong when I said 21, 19 or 20, those studies go out usually about 5 years. They take into account pay raises. They take into account people leaving, coming back. So that study should be somewhat valid. The problem with the FRP board actually doing another cost study is, will they? It's city controlled. They can determine, yeah, we don't want to do another cost study. There's nothing that the firefighters can do with that. So we're just going to continue to sit here and have members being harmed. And each year as we go through, we're going to have more members being harmed. Again, it's a very small amount of people. It's 38. But I'm sure you wouldn't want to be one of those 38 that are paying 9% of your salary for years waiting to be able to collect a pension or at least drop. So that's, I don't know if that cleared up anything or I can answer anything else.
Yeah, I think that clears it up for me. I don't know. I had a separate question. I had just heard that there was some communication between you, but maybe it's not around 144.
Yes. Yes, there was. So I did speak to Nancy Cross over this bill. At least when we spoke, this was right before the holidays. She didn't say that the mayor's office had any issues with the bill at all. We did talk about the scribbler's error that would have to be corrected because everybody else would definitely not be covered by that cost study, just the 38. And everybody was, pretty comfortable with that amendment to clear that up.
Okay, that completes my questions. Thank you.
I don't have any questions. Also, if we can, I do see director has one more comment, and also seeing Alderwoman Keyes' hand was up. So if I can go to the director first, and if we can keep it on, I guess, the 144 before we get to the 146, so we don't confuse everybody, that would be just helpful. Director, proceed.
Yes, thank you, Alderman. I did want to address one of the points that was the reference to the school board's case. And my understanding, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding was pertains to whether or not you can increase a benefit when you're less than 80% funded. We're just under 80% funded. That's what that case was about. It wasn't about having a study done. The study, and let me be very specific. You can't say, oh, we did a study a few years ago, we don't think anything's changed. If the actuary was here, because we asked them this very question when it came up last fall, they would say that estimate is not valid, simply because, one, it's not current, two, you've had an experience study that we've adopted, and that would be the actuary's testimony. I can tell you that because we asked very specifically. Also, in terms of the negotiation, I should mention that Casey still is here. She may be able to provide some insight in terms of what that going back and forth was. So I'd suggest you may want to ask her that question.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Casey is next after we hear questions from the committee, and then we have to ask her questions as well. But I wanted to go to Ms. Keyes, whose hand was up really quickly.
I'd be happy to yield to Ms. I'm sorry, I don't want to botch the last name, Casey, and hear what she has to say before I comment. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna go to Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. She has a question.
Thank you, because and Ms. Milberg, I know we definitely still want to hear from you. But in the meantime, I don't know if we can get some kind of legal opinion, Alderman Narayan or Mr. Clark or whoever, because, I just want to make sure, first of all, I definitely sympathize with the 38. But I want to make sure that we're not doing things that are just performative. And if there's a legal issue that this can't be enforced without that, which is some of the correspondence that I know I'm receiving, I'm not sure if my colleagues are as well, then we want to make sure we have that clear before we move forward so that we do the best we can on behalf of not just the 38, but our beloved fire department as a whole. So, Ms. Milberg, I know that Vice Chair would like to still hear from you, but I don't know if the powers that be are watching can check into that and get back to us as well with the bottom line. Is this enforceable, legally enforceable without that actuary study?
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go to I'm gonna go to Ms. Milberg first, and I know we have people here in favor, but I just want to get all the departments first, if that's okay, and then we'll go straight to folks that are in favor or opposed for this legislation. Ms. Casey Milberg, you may proceed.
Great. Do I need to be sworn in again, or the affirmation?
No, you don't.
Okay. All right. Well, for the record, Casey Milberg with the Mayor's Office, and yes, the comments that I'm prepared to present on 144 do squarely address the statutory issue that we're talking about, and I'm happy that we're digging into it because there are two statutes at issue. One that pertains to the court case that was referenced, which is not the point that Director Payne is bringing up, There's a separate statute that still applies regardless of that court case. Starting with the statute that pertains to the court case that's referenced. That is section 105.684.1 RISMO. And what that does is it prohibits an increase in benefits unless the firefighter's retirement plan is 80% funded and after the adoption would be not less than 75% funded. The court case that's referenced held that expanding eligibility for a benefit is not a benefit increase because the change does not increase the rate of a member's retirement benefits. It simply modifies the eligibility requirements under which members can receive their normal benefits. In the court's words, in other words, the change simply allows members to retire earlier if they meet necessary conditions. That's the statute that court case pertains to, and that is not the statute at issue here. The statute at issue here is section 105.665.1 RISMO. What that clearly says is it requires the preparation of a cost statement prepared by the FRP actuary before, quote, final action on any substantial proposed change in plan benefits is taken. Section 105.660 RISMO is where the definition in state law of substantial proposed change in plan benefits is. And that is included in the definition is increase in the total contribution percent by at least 1/4% of active employee payroll, an increase or decrease in a plan benefit by 5% or more, or if it would materially affect the actuarial soundness of the plan. Section 105.665.1 is the one that we are talking about here, the one that imposes the requirement cost statement prepared by the FRP actuary before, quote, final action on any substantial proposed change in plan benefits is taken. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, to address your question about legal opinion, our office did seek one from the City Councilor's office, and they were the ones who advised us that 105.665.1 RISMO is the one that controls in this situation. And that means that the preparation of the cost statement by the FRP actuary is what would be required here. And the purpose of that, when you look at the intent of the law, is to just provide transparency in terms of what the fiscal implications of this would be. That's the whole purpose of a cost statement. So before something happens, what is the actual cost statement that we are dealing with the proposed change?
All right, thank you, Ms. Milberg. I will go in order of seniority. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Any questions? No questions. Alderwoman Keys.
Yes, thank you. So my question is this, we're talking about an actuarial study that sounds like it's going to be needed. But is there any directive that would speak to when that would be done, or a deadline that it must be completed by, and who's supposed to do it and who's supposed to pay for it? Because I wouldn't like to see this thing, oh, we need an actuarial study and it never gets done. Because we are dealing with human beings who have performed, their service to our city. I would hope that this would be something that could be completed fairly quickly, so that an informed decision could be rendered in hopes of making this clear where we should be standing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Alderwoman. What I can say is the controlling state statute specifies that cost statement must be prepared, quote, before final action on the change in plan benefits. We did not ask the city councilor to specifically dig into what final action means. Certainly, our office signing it into law, if the mayor were to sign it into law, that seems reasonable that could be considered final action, to codify any proposed changes. We'd be happy to have the city councilor dig into what is considered final action, just in terms of what that dropping point is in terms of when does this thing actually have to be prepared. In terms of the nuts and bolts of how quickly these can be produced, I'm not sure. Paul, you may be better positioned to speak to that. I have not dealt with that particular.
In terms of the timing of when it would be produced? How long? Typically, if you have something that comes, and again, I'm assuming, and let's put aside questions of cost, and you come before the board, FRP, and say, hey, we would like to have this study done in we're going to pay for it, or somebody's going to pay for it, whatever. That would be something that the board would take up at its monthly meetings. And so that would be, our next meeting would be in February, and we just had one today. And then it would be up to the actuary to provide that estimate. I don't know how much time that would take. It has been done before, so I would expect that it wouldn't be much, but you'd have numbers, obviously. So that's how that would occur.
So there is no specific directive as to a timeline?
Well, there's nothing, because it's reliant on the actuary to provide the numbers. I can't speak to them in terms of how long that, when they would come back. I mean, I just know in terms of the protocols for requesting things that's how it would work.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alderman. Thank you, Alderman McKees. Alderman Velazquez.
Okay, not to belabor this point, but I just want to make sure I understand. So Alderman Narayan, just as you were describing earlier with the teachers union case, you feel that this regulation, as the city councilor interpreted, does not necessarily apply to this statute. Not a lawyer. No, you are, but.
So I believe that she's talking about a different issue there. We also disagree on that issue, I guess, is really what it comes down to. And I think that for me personally, like I said, I think this is an issue of fundamental fairness. And when the workers who are the beneficiaries of these plans say, hey, we disagree with the administration on something and we're willing to fight about it, then, I think I'm a big proponent of letting workers be in control of their futures.
No, right. No, I think the question for me is, I think what do we need to follow as far as, legally, and to your earlier testimony, Mr. Clark, I mean, I think I've looked at those numbers, I think, from the earlier study, and are they really going to change that much? I would guess that probably not. But do we have to follow it? I mean, is there something that if we don't follow it, that it doesn't, that we run into a risk? And that's really the question I'm trying to ask. And so, and how long it will take, I'm not an actuary either. I don't know if there's one in the audience here. But I think those are questions that we should consider. But no, I agree that this is a finite, it is fixing something that I think was probably an unintended consequence of what had happened before. And just, are we dotting our I's and crossing our T's in the legal way?
I believe that the men and women in Local 73 believe that they have dotted their I's and crossed their T's on this, on both of those particular issues. Someone may be able to speak to the specifics of it. Would the committee mind hearing from Mr. Clark again on this matter?
We can hear one more time on 144 from Mr. Clark on this matter. Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, the state statute does say that there has to be a study. Again, we know that there is a study. I don't know that the state statute says that a study that is under 5 years old is not good enough. I guess maybe that's the question. But it's interesting when we're talking about following state statutes. When FRP was made, it was under 60% funded. The state statute says you'll hyper accelerate your payments to that system to become over 80%, to get it close to 80%. We didn't follow that because we didn't want to then. We're trying to follow this one to a T as quickly as possible to get relief for these members. Again, if a 4, or I guess we're however old now on that study isn't acceptable, then I guess we got to go back and figure that out. But again, these aren't new members. That pay should be the same. These are 38 people that are getting close to that 30-year mark or already over it. And again, when they do these studies, they forecast out generally around 5 years to take into account raises, people leaving, things of that nature. So that's where we're at on these.
I did get a bit of guidance from Budget Director Paul Payne, and the answer is it has to be based on the most recent actuarial assessment.
And I think we said this, the last actuary assessment was what year? just this past year?
The last one was the one that was based on the fiscal year, or the plan year ending October 30th of 2022.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Saunier. Questions for Ms. Millbrook?
Can I get the name of the case that's before the Eastern District?
So the case, it did go all the way to the Missouri Court of Appeals, Public School Retirement System of the City of St. Louis versus the State of Missouri. It was decided in 2020, and I'm happy to email you the exact case reporter citation that's available too.
Thank you. And my other question is for Alderman Ryan. I know we have the city councilor, but I know we also have a board attorney. Have you had any other eyes like look at this bill and kind of agree with your analysis of it?
I think over the last 3 years, I think probably half the lawyers that work for this have taken a look at this bill at some point or another. It's been through a whole lot of discussion, both with the unions, with the administration, and with the previous members of this board as well.
Okay, thank you.
I do have some questions. I know the 144 is kind of the new one, and then we still got to get to 146, which I know I wasn't here beforehand, but I do remember watching that on YouTube, which people can always go back and watch, when Alderman Oldenburg was the alderman, and I know he thought he was very close to getting it done. We'll see what happened this year. But with, I guess, far as on the legal opinion part, and as much as you can share as Ms. Millbrook, when, I guess, was, because I know the legislation, I think the Board of Aldermen are now like in number 200 for as board bills being filed. Sure. And this is Board Bill 144. Sounds like some conversations from the bill sponsor, Local 73, and the mayor's office have been in conversations, which is always good, because I know we're really big at the board of making sure all directors or departments are in conversations. But was, I guess, was this a recent legal opinion that was just provided to the bill sponsor or from the city councilors, or have this been something that was provided like 2 months ago? Time frame wise, I guess.
Sure. I'd have to go back and confirm the date of receipt of the opinion, but our office requested it, I want to say mid or late fall, around that time frame.
Okay.
And then, yeah, on the date of receipt, I'd have to go back and confirm that.
And
it's not like what's in within the past week or two or anything like that.
Okay. And I know the city council get a lot of requests and a lot of lawsuits pending and stuff from city. Just trying to figure out kind of the time frame. So maybe when we was able to kind of get this legal part resolved. Yeah. And right now I will save my questions. I have some more questions, but I'll save it to the end, because I know we have speakers here in the public.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. I think those are all the questions for Ms. Millbrook. All right. Madam Clerk, I know I started with favor when Mr. Dan Clark spoke. Is there any in opposition to speak against the bill?
I have none.
All right. And the next person in favor to speak?
We have no one else.
All righty.
Not on Board Bill 144.
Not on 144. Okay. Well, if that is the case, I will have the bill sponsor come back up, and I will just ask the committee if they have one more round of questions for the sponsor before he close out, starting with Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Okay. Alderwoman Keys.
Yes, thank you. Just one question. So, and I'm just scribbling stuff down here, but October of 22 is when the last actuarial study was done. Is that correct? I thought that's what Mr. Payne said.
The valuation is as of October 1st, 2022, but it would have been released, I believe, January of last year.
Okay, all righty, I'm good with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I will go to Alderwoman Velasquez.
No questions right now.
And Alderwoman Saunier.
No questions right now.
All right. Alderman Orion, you are up to close.
At this point, I'm going to hold Board Bill number 144 as amended for a week while we just go over a couple of these issues and make sure that we've got everything accounted for.
All right. Awesome. So before we go to Board Bill 146, if we could just take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back to Board Bill 146. All right, the Committee on Public Safety will resume from recess. And with that, I will go to Chairman Orion to present Board Bill 146. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Vice Chair Aldridge. We're back with 146, which is more fun on the city firefighter pension. As I know that the members of this committee are aware, there's been discussion of essentially a merger in between the Firemen's Retirement System Board of Trustees and the Firefighters Retirement Board Plan of Trustees. There is an older retirement system and a newer retirement system. The members essentially are paying for overhead for two different boards right now, one city-run, one more privately run, and they would like to decrease the amount of overhead that they're paying out to the to administrative costs. Additionally, the return on investment is drastically different, and the members would like to see their retirement funds managed by the system that gives them a higher return on investment with their retirement dollars. And I believe that I've spoken with most of the committee on this, and I believe that most of the committee is all from Local 73 on their presentation on how they would propose that this works, which is essentially this piece of legislation, as well as hearing from the administration on their thoughts on the matter. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I will state to the committee that Alderman Oldenburg couldn't be here today. He had a family issue. I was pretty heavily reliant on some of his information on this, so I may need to, if there are questions that I can't get to off the top of my head, I may need to just poke my head into the peanut gallery here and get an answer for the committee.
Gotcha, Alderman. So before we call up the departments and then people in favor or against, I will start with Alder people who may have questions for the bill sponsor. And first in seniority, I will start with Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
No questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Velazquez.
No questions at this time.
Alderwoman Tonier.
Thank you. Would you rather to hold questions until Alderman Oldenburg is here? Like, are you planning on just bringing this back up next week, or because I'm happy to, it might be better if
I think we'll see where the day takes.
And this is the bill that came up before. This is the one that was vetoed.
It's essentially word for word the bill that came up.
Yes. Maybe it would just be helpful to give some context about just what happened last time, or I guess my specific question is, I just would like to put on record the reasons why we're for and the hesitancy. So if maybe you could just speak to some of the reasons why you support and some of the reasons of why there are folks who disagree with it. If like whatever context you could share around that, and also happy to have anyone else speak to it as well.
Sure. So I think first and foremost, this just goes to a core belief of mine that people who are working and saving for retirement should be in charge of those retirement dollars. Right now, we have two systems. We're seeing a wildly different return on the investment of these retirement dollars to the eventual beneficiaries, to those workers. Understandably, the workers would like to be able to invest in the system that has repeatedly had higher returns on investment so that they can maximize their retirement benefits. In any line of work, but particularly, with first responders, you have a situation where you're putting your body on the line every day. You may not be able to physically be able to continue working after you hit the age of retirement. Your body may just not be able to do what you needed to do to physically get out there and do whatever work you may need to do. So it's important that these retirement benefits are maximized during the lifespan of the worker's employment so that they have the most dollars there at the end of their career to last them through retirement. So I think that there's an important piece there that's just about my fundamental belief that workers should be in charge of their retirement. Now, this bill has been in front of the Board of Aldermen in, I would say, various iterations, but really the main thing that's changed is now it says introduced by Alderman Brett Narayan November 3rd, 2023, and not introduced by Alderman Tom Oldenburg on some date previous. This is the same board bill that got 18 votes, I believe, in our previous session when we were a board of 28. Then the mayor vetoed it, and I can't get into the specifics of why the mayor vetoed it. I don't know, but I know that there had been discussions between 73 and the mayor's office, so someone behind me may be able to give you more specifics on the reason for the veto pen coming out. We then had the veto override session, and the votes were there to override the mayor's veto. We were going to need, I believe, it was either 19 or 20 votes at that time. I'd have to go back and look at the rules for that session to override the veto. The votes were there, but there was an individual who had a specific time that they needed to get on a flight, and there was a bit of a filibuster out of a member who pushed the meeting into the time frame where we as a board of aldermen lost the votes necessary to override that veto towards the end of the session. So it was kind of understood that the votes really were there, the support for it was there. The men and women of the fire department had, made their case to the board at that time who believed in that situation, and it was just kind of understood that this was not the last that we were going to be hearing of this legislation, and so now I am carrying this exact same piece of legislation, and it's a very different body, so I know that no one's votes are, even if the same individuals are here, I'm not counting on anyone's specific votes, but I hope that after hearing from the firefighters on this issue that I know that we are a pretty labor-forward board, and I think that most of us, if we have, retirement accounts, anything like that, we like to know that the individual who is looking over those accounts has a responsibility to us as individuals to maximize our return on investment so that we can have a easier time as we age. And with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
I don't know if someone from the mayor's office or Paul Payne, Mr. Payne might want to speak to the reasons for not, like, why you oppose it.
Well, I don't know if they're opposed yet. I can have them come up after the alderman to speak on it. If you're okay with that, alder lady? Okay. I would only. Did you have any other questions, alder lady? Okay. Only question I have, so just to be clear, this is the same word by word, comma by comma, period by period of the board bill that Alderman Oldenburg sponsored last session?
I believe so.
Okay. All right, with that, I will start this time just to a little bit of clarity, this time with departments, and then I will go into people in favor or opposed. So first, I will start with Mr. Payne from the budget, our budget director from the budget department. Mr. Paul Payne, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, members of the committee. Yeah, this seems like deja vu all over again. I've been through this a few times and prepared. I got some prepared remarks I'll go through. As I mentioned earlier, whereas I do believe there's some solution potential on 144. 146, I think is a little bit more problematic. And just to give you a little history, I've got some information to share with you, and that'll give you a little bit more fiscal background, but I'll just go through my remarks first and then get to that. Proposed Board Bill 146 is not about saving administrative costs. In reality, the costs associated with the fire's retirement system as a frozen plan should be declining over time anyway. What instead the proposed bill is really about is taking a step backward toward undoing the pension reforms that created the firefighters' retirement plan back in 2012. For those that argue that any additional changes require additional ordinances or change in the trustee board is just perfunctory, keep in mind that the old FRS system didn't get broken all at once or with a single ordinance, but over a period of many years, where due diligence gave way to complacency over time. It led to a system where nearly half of all retirees retired on disability, where pension system staff was paid exorbitant salaries and benefits, and the overall cost to city taxpayers ballooned to consume a third of the fire department's budget. Pension bills are long-term propositions, where the impact is not likely to be felt next year, the following year, or even the year after that, but rather in 5, 10, 15, and 20 years into the future. That's why cities often get into fiscal trouble with their pension system, where short-term political calculations outweigh the longer-term fiscal impacts. The pension reform legislation that froze the old FRS system and created the FRP provided reforms to the retirement system that were much needed and long. This included putting the Board of Trustees under local control rather than Jefferson City, a provision that this bill proposes to forfeit outright. Given a state legislature that often takes actions that are contrary to the city's interests, it's hard to imagine how a proposal to cede this level of control back to the state could be advanced at the city's Board of Aldermen. Since its beginning from scratch nearly a decade ago, the FRP, as of its most recent valuation, has surpassed $150 million in assets, was just under 80% in funded status, and had done so at an annual cost to taxpayers at about half of what it was prior to the reform effort. The FRP board and its staff, meanwhile, have continued to serve active and retired members of the system with administrative costs at less than half of the old FRS system. There is a lot of talk these days about the need for reforms in city government. This is a reform that, through determined leadership and a lot of hard effort, actually made it on the books. Would-be reformers should take note that this should become an example of a successful reform effort being led down that path of becoming undone. And attached to these remarks, I've got some supporting material. It's basically a memo. I don't know if you've seen these, just giving you some historical background in terms of the cost of the pension system, what our contributions were over the years, how it rose over the years, the comparison of the administrative costs of the two systems and such, and I'll leave that with the committee. And I'd be available for any questions you might have.
Mr. Payne, I'm sorry, could you provide that information that you just read to the clerk?
I brought it with me today, this whole package. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. And starting order of seniority, I will start with Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Any questions for Director Payne? Alderwoman Keys? You on mute, Alderwoman.
Thank you for being here
there you
today,
go.
Mr. Payne. Thank you. No, I do not have any questions at this time. I yield.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Velasquez. Velasquez. It's K, Kez.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. So I wasn't here last session, and I think I've looked at the bill and heard, talked to folks from Local 73. So just coming at it from just a new set of eyes, I guess. I know that there was a moment that led us to this, but how does having two pension systems make sense for for a city our size?
Well, you have to think about pension systems as overall. The city has now 4. One, which is the ERS system, which, well, first of all, they're all governed in some respects by state statutes in higher level, but there are other provisions where cities maintain their own and there are other states. So if you look at, there's the ERS system, which is governed by a city ordinance primarily. You have the old FRS system, the frozen system, which is enabled by state statute, but then there are city ordinances that are enacted to carry out those enabling statutes. There's the new FRP system, which is, again, when we did that reform, that was created because of the way that system was, we put that under city ordinance. And then there's the state, which is, and this is the weirdest one of all, the PRS, it's the police retirement system, which is entirely under the state. So in other words, the city pays the benefits and it's determined by state statute. So there's sort of a mishmash of who is in control of what the various pension funds are. To your point, I do believe, you would not ideally want 2 different systems, but unfortunately, the city was in the position where it didn't control its own fate because it was the state that did the enabling. And any changes that you would want to do locally, you had to go to the state first. And so what we did back then was that we withdrew from that system and created the new system, so therefore you've got the ability to make changes, as we discussed here today, with FRP. And you don't need the state to do that. And I think that's, when you think about having your control of your own fiscal outlook, you'd rather have a city ordinance versus a state statute. Yeah, again, I scratch my head where when you think about what you know about state legislature, why we would want to invite the state legislature back into the system. That's not something that makes sense to me.
Right, I think thank you for clarifying the 4. I mean, the 2 for the firefighters doesn't make sense. I know where it came from and how we got here, but it just seems to be, not an actuary, but it seems to be for maintaining a plan for a small group of people also doesn't seem cost efficient or resource efficient either. I understand that that's not the part that you're focused on as much as the issue versus local or state control, but that is kind of what sticks out in my mind.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it wouldn't have been ideal, but unfortunately, that was the statute we had. Now, under the FRS, that system is continuing to wind down. It's a frozen plan. So you have fewer, I believe you have like about 200 fewer active members than you did have 10 years ago. And
to maintain that until...
And that will continue to draw down. And meanwhile, the liabilities and assets of the new system will then ultimately take over.
I have no further questions.
Alderwoman Saunier.
No questions at this time.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I do have maybe a question or two. So as from the budget standpoint, I kind of want to get into what Alderwoman Velasquez brought up, how do we save money? Do we lose money? Even though as a new member, I know as 3 of us are new on the committee, so we wasn't really part of some of these conversations in the past. I've heard stories on both sides, but what does bringing it to one system does? From what you would say from the budget side, does that help the city? Does it hurt the city? I would assume with having one, it may save us more money than...
Yeah, I would, again, I've got a hard copy and I can share with you. I'll share with you the contribution differences that we've seen since the plan was adopted and the reform effort was pursued. So, but As I mentioned, the contributions as a percentage of the total budget, operating budget of the fire department was over 30% back then. And now it's down to something like 17%. And so, and meanwhile, the system itself is nearly 80% funded. Had you asked me 10 years ago, would we have achieved that milestone, I would have been pleasantly surprised that we'd be at where we're at now. So again, it is not the ideal situation, but unfortunately, when you have a system where it's the state is controlling the system, I think you still have that issue with the PRS side. That's not an ideal situation either. You're not in charge of your own fiscal destiny, so to speak.
Okay. I think that's I'm good for now. And maybe you or actually, well, one last question. Maybe you or the chairman can ask how long has this been going on where there's been a request for one system?
This is the third time that I am aware of that this bill has been introduced.
And you are speaking to keep the two systems?
You're talking about the Board of Trustees, right? Yeah. I'm speaking to keep the FRP Board of Trustees as it is. Yes.
Are you a trustee at any?
Yes.
Okay. On the which system?
On the FRP, which is the new system. The other system's frozen. Actually, I would suggest, and I mentioned this, the cost. If you were looking about costs, the FRP system administrative cost is half of the FRS cost, and that's with continuing new enrollments. FRS isn't enrolling anyone new because it's a frozen plan. So, I mean, ideally, you would think you'd go the other way, but that's a different discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Director. No further questions from the committee. I will have Ms. Millbrook come up to speak on Board Bill 146. And she was already sworn in, the director was already sworn in. We don't have to do all that again. I know I didn't.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you have any other questions for the director, Ms. Keys, before I can't see if your hand's up or not.
Thank you. No questions.
Okay, we'll go to Ms. Millbrook. Please proceed.
Hello. I will try to be brief. Much of this has been shared with the committee members previously, and it has also been shared with the bill sponsor earlier on this week. So we are just trying to be transparent and consistent with all members in this conversation today. So starting with Board Bill 146, one initial issue to draw to your attention is language on page 13, lines 15 through 17. That is the language that says, nothing in the plan shall allow for an amendment to Chapter 4.1 Fireman's Retirement System to be effective without a prior amendment to Chapter 87 of the revised statutes of the state of Missouri containing the same language. I know this is something Director Payne spoke about previously, but once again, it says without a prior amendment to the state law, meaning that I'd have to get the state legislature on board and the governor on board as well prior to doing anything, prior to having the power to change that at the local level as we currently do. So that is something that we are significantly concerned about. We don't think that is appropriate. And it certainly would limit the city's ability to control its own budget. So that is something that we are concerned about, and the city councilors also advised that that is their interpretation of this language as well. The second concern that we would raise is the potential negative impact to the city's bond rating. The city's successful reform of the fire pension system is regularly referenced by Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor bond rating agencies as a positive factor for purpose of setting the city's bond rating. We are concerned that reverting has the potential to eliminate that advantage and could have a negative impact upon the city's bond rating, especially at a time when we are looking to focus long-term on infrastructure investments. The bond rating determines the quality of the interest rate the city receives to pay on bond debt. The third issue that we are concerned about under advice of the city's councilor's office is that the merger proposed by this legislation would create some unavoidable conflicts of interest by creating a single board of trustees that is charged in governing two separate pensions plans. Members of each board of trustees for the pension plans, they owe fiduciary duty to their respective plans. Trustees of the FRS have an ultimate duty to that plan. Trustees of the FRP have an ultimate duty to the city. Putting them under one board will require the new board to make decisions where they will have to choose one plan over the other ultimately, which could expose them to breach of fiduciary duty claims. So we are very mindful of that concern. The next issue that has been raised, this is on pages 12 and 13. Lines, actually, I believe this is more on page 12. Yes, this is on page 12. Lines 13 through 16, the language that says, the Board of Trustees may retain employees of the plan appointed by the City Director of Personnel until such time as the Board of Trustees determines that the employees of the Fireman's Retirement System are prepared to perform the work for that plan. During such time as the employees appointed by the Director of Personnel are working for the plan, the Board of Trustees and not the Director of Personnel shall direct the work of such employees. The concern that the City Councilor's Office has raised with us about this language is that this would unlawfully convert tenured civil service employees of the city and the FRP into at-will employees of the old Fireman's Retirement System. FRP employees are civil service. That would eliminate the civil service protections to convert them to at-will employees. We believe this would be a violation of the city charter, which provides that civil service employees are entitled to indefinite tenure of employment in positions in the classified service during meritorious service and may not be terminated except for cause. We've also been made aware of a Missouri Supreme Court case that has held that employees of the FRS are not part of the city's civil service and that FRP staff are civil service employees. So that is that concern. And then the final concern that we would raise is the language on page 6, lines 8 through 12. And this language this language reads, the Board of Trustees shall retain actuaries in accordance with the policies established by the Board of Trustees as may be revised or amended by the Board of Trustees from time to time. The actuaries retained by the Board of Trustees may be the same actuaries retained by the Board of Trustees of the Fireman's Retirement System. On city books right now, we have Ordinance 64102, which governs professional services selection procedures for professional services. The FRP is required to comply with that, including when hiring investment advisors, actuaries, et cetera. So the language currently appears to be contrary to the citywide policy requiring bidding for professional services. And that was also something under the guidance of the City Councilor's Office. So those are the 5 major concerns that we would highlight in addition to the commentary shared by Budget Director Payne about the fiscal concerns that he has raised.
Thank you, Ms. Millbrook. I will start in order of seniority. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
Thank you. No, I do not have any questions at this time.
Thank you. Alderwoman Velazquez.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Milberg. I know we're in the business of thinking about how this affects us locally, but are there other cities? Is Kansas City's, for instance, is there pension plan? I mean, do they have pensions plans that are like ours in the sense that they have ones that are essentially operated by the state?
I would have to look at that, to be honest with you. I'm not familiar with how they structure their pension plans, but I'd be very happy to dig into that and share that with the full committee.
That'd be great. I'm just curious, in the sense that, why I'm a firm believer in local control in as many ways as possible if the risks that we're suggesting here, if there are other cities that have similar, pension plans, and if they're not, how that's working. I'd be curious to find out.
Sure. It occurs to me that because Kansas City is currently the only city in the country under state take police force, that their police system, pension system may be governed under state statute accordingly. I don't know about the fire system, so we are happy to check into that.
And I don't know if local, if when one of the, if you all could have, perfect.
We
Mr. Chair, acting chair. Do you want to have to, we can wait until,
yeah, let's wait to.
those are my only questions for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Could we hear you on the mic? Yes. Well, could we first go through the finish the committee? Alderwoman Sonye, did you have any questions?
My question is for Alderman Ryan. I want to respond, so that's fine. I'll just wait.
And you want to respond now, or did you want to wait to the end of?
I can respond what Ms. Milberg has just stated. Thank you, Alderwoman. I can certainly respond to that. So I don't steal your phone. So I think the first thing that was brought up was on page 13. The idea that the state legislature needs to change some laws before this were to become effective. I think each individual in front of me right now has a trigger bill pending before this Board of Aldermen, which would require the state to act before their bill would become effective. We also know that the firefighters have been actively engaged with the state legislature on this issue, who is fairly friendly to this issue. And so I find that argument to be less convincing than some of the other arguments put forward, because yes, it wouldn't be effective until the state legislature acted on it. This body is currently engaged in many, many things that will not be effective until the state legislature acts on them. So chalk this up as another trigger bill then. But we know that the state legislature is actively engaged in this. There's a bill that was second read, was it just second read? Second read in front of the state legislature on this particular issue last week, I believe. This week, recently. January 28th, the 8th, January 8th. So then if we go over to the conflicts issue, where you have a fiduciary obligation, again, and this is just maybe a disagreement between myself and some other folks, and reasonable folks disagree on things. But I know if I had my retirement fund invested in something, I think it's great for someone to have a fiduciary obligation to the city. But if you're holding on to my retirement fund, I want you to have a fiduciary obligation to me, because you hold the keys to my future. And I think that in virtually any other line of work, when you look at the obligation that the folks controlling your retirement accounts have, if they have a fiduciary obligation, it is to you. It's not to another entity. In fact, that's a bit problematic, I would say, and maybe why one of these systems has a better return than the other system. In page 12, which is something that Ms. Milberg and I discussed actually yesterday at some length to try and come up with what that may look like in terms of someone with civil service protections, if their department was to essentially cease to exist, which is what may happen for some of these positions. Should these two systems merge, you would have certain redundancies and certain jobs may cease to exist. So that doesn't mean that person is just fired. They still work for the city, and I don't know if you guys have noticed how many job openings we have with the city right now under this, that have civil service protections. But in the past, we've gotten rid of entire departments in the city where people had those civil service protections. And we're talking about a relatively small number of jobs here. I'm not trying to downplay any one specific job. I know that's their livelihood. But no one here is trying to get rid of good employees that have civil service protections. We're just saying there's an administrative cost to keeping two systems alive, and we can potentially reduce that burden, have a better outcome for the folks who are investing in that system, because again, that fiduciary obligation, and for the folks at home, a fiduciary duty is an obligation to put the person who you owe that fiduciary duty to, you have to put them ahead of yourself while making decisions. So when someone says they have a fiduciary duty to the city and they're looking out for your retirement, what they're telling you is, I have to look out for the city's best interest before I look out for your retirement's best interest, which is problematic when you're talking about someone's retirement. I think, at least. I certainly would not invest my retirement with someone who had a fiduciary duty to an entity that was not me or the other members of my my retirement fund. And yeah, I think that's, I can't read my writing on the second thing I wrote, so I'm not sure what it was, but I don't think so. It'll come back up, I feel certain. Okay. But yeah, I hope that addresses some of the things that and Casey and I have gone over in great detail, and I respect her opinion very much, and sometimes we just don't see eye to eye on it, and that's what you're doing. So thank you.
All right. Any other questions, Alderwoman Tonye?
Nope, thank you.
All right, no questions. I guess just to your comment, Mr. Chair, more of a comment. I'm happy when you talk about Jeff City, you know, not worrying about what they do, because I know there's also future legislation. We shouldn't put too much worried about what Jeff City do when it comes to legislating the local authorities. But outside that, I do not have anything for Ms. Millbrook, and I will go with people in favor or opposed, starting with folks in favor for the Board Bill 146.
We have two speakers, John Brewer and Mr. Dan Clark.
All right. Mr. John, we will give you 3 minutes. I got my...
He needs to be sworn in.
You be sworn in if you can raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, Mr. John, your time starts now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, maybe good evening. I'm here to speak in favor of Board Bill 146. My name's John Brewer. I'm the Executive Director of the Firemen's Retirement System in St. Louis. I was a city firefighter for over 20 years. I was one of those individuals affected by a reduction of my benefit. My educational background includes a master's degree in finance. I last spoke in front of this committee back in 2022. At the time, my biggest concern was portfolio risk, diversification risk. That's risk in being limited to what you can invest. We have a large investment portfolio at the FRS, $420 million. FRP, the new system, has an additional $120 million. As of fiscal year 2022, I would ask Mr. Payne to check his numbers. I believe they're 3 years old. Board Bill 146 would allow for investing all that money together from both systems. It would take advantage of lower investment fees, lower portfolio overall risk, but the funds would need to be kept tracked separately. You'd still have to have individual valuations, individual audits each year for both systems. Going all equities is great some years, but it's very bad in the down years, especially for city contributions. Creates wide swings in returns. When you diversify, you smooth out those returns. You have lower highs, but you have higher lows. You're trying to meet that middle road. That in turn helps maintain a more stable contribution requirement for the city. I'll demonstrate that in a moment, but first I'd just like to quote something that I committee back in 2022. Quote, a combined portfolio would reduce risk. There are many asset classes that FRP, the new system's not large enough to invest in. meaning they're not able to properly diversify the risk of the portfolio. That portfolio would now have access to the same investments as FRS and hence the same diversification. Likewise, as FRS winds down many years from now, it would benefit from the same paired diversification. And that diversification means a steadier return for the systems over time, which creates a steadier required contribution rate for the city. End quote. I still stand by that statement today. Little did I know when I made that statement that I would have a practical example of diversity risk to show you here today, just a year and a half later. In that same year, that same hearing in 2022, Director Payne highlighted to this committee that the new system, FRP, had grown to $140 million and was over 82% funded.
That's time, sir. Okay.
I'm about halfway.
Halfway, go, continue.
Okay. In fact, Director Payne touted that the FRP outperformed FRS by 2% that year, which it did. Fast forward to the most recent fiscal year 2022 that we have on record, the valuation that shows a completely different picture. FRP is now under the 80% threshold. We've heard that with Board Bill 144. FRP is now at 77.6% funded. That's of the latest valuation. That is due to a loss of 18.9% in fiscal year 22. Let me put that into perspective for you. That loss was larger than any one-year loss in the entire history of the fireman's retirement system. That loss was larger than any one-year loss in the entire history of the police retirement system. That loss was larger than any one-year loss in the entire history of the employees' retirement system. Those are the other three systems in the city. They've been around for decades. The fireman's retirement system has been around since 1893. Again, the new system, FRP, lost 18.9% last year, greater than any loss during the Great Recession of 2008, which was the impetus for pension reform and closing a system that was 120 years old. FRS. The FRP board, the new system, has 7 members, 3 firefighters, 2 mayoral appointees, the comptroller, and budget director Payne. The FRP board, the new board, is the only retirement board in the city where members are not the majority on the board. The police retirement system has 8 current members. 7 of them are police officers. 1 is a representative from the comptroller's office. ERS has 6 members, all of which are city employees and members in the system they represent. In fact, Budget Director Payne sits on and is a voting member of the FRP board that has the distinction of returning the highest one-year loss to any pension system in the history of the city. Now compare that to the other 3 pension plans. Last year, ERS lost 13.5%. Police retirement system lost 11.25%, and FRS, the old system, lost 11.18%. The outlier is clearly the fireman's retirement plan, the new system, which did 7.7% worse than the old system FRS. That is a direct result of diversification risk. What I've been talking about for the last 3 years, it's finally happened, and now you can see it. I'd like to just finish up by pointing out one thing on page 8 of the FRP, the new system's 2022 fiscal year valuation report, which was approved by Mr. Payne and the FRP board. I have it here, and I'd like to make it available afterwards. The new system, FRP, has an assumed rate of return of 7%. That's what they're trying to hit every year. If they do better, good. If they do worse. FRP has a 5-year smoothing process to reduce the impact of any one-year return. like if you lose 18.9%. Their own actuary points out on page 8 of this report that even with these things in place, the FRP is expected to go from 7.9 million a year required contribution from the city in 2022 to a 20 million a year required contribution from the city in 2027. That's 5 years. Once the full smoothing is taken into effect, the required contribution is going to more than double, almost triple. These are audited numbers by their own actuary. They're indisputable. The contribution is expected to stay near 20 million per year through 2042. The damage has been done. It's time to give members, the firefighters, control their retirement like every other employee in the city. Board Bill 146 does that. It's good for the city. It saves the city money. It's good for the firefighters, and it simplifies the administration of both systems. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could provide that information to the clerk so that it could be noted.
Yes, I will.
And Alderman, I know we have one more speaker, but I do want to, since that person was on the favorite poll, just respectful of time, because I know we have STL TV and also our staff that usually get off if we get into the 5 o'clock hour. So just want to, keep us moving swiftly so we can figure out what's the next steps so it's not 3 hours later. Any questions for members of the committee? Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
No questions, and I just want to thank Mr. Brewer. You made a very compelling argument.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Velazquez.
I'll keep it short. If you have any perspective on what else is happening in the state as far as comparison, that's great. If not, we can come back to it another time.
Sure, just real quick, I can say Kansas City-wise, mimics St. Louis almost exactly. The police retirement system is a state-run system. The fire and the employee retirement systems are local, similar to what we were prior to 2013. We are the outlier.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Tonye.
Out of respect for time, I'm going to hold my questions. I always love seeing fierce advocacy, and I know that's not always easy to do, especially in these circumstances. So I just want to let you know that I really respect and appreciate your advocacy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do appreciate it. That was very helpful information. I know I've met with you, with several older people to talk in depth about both plans, especially as a new person coming in, to kind of hear a little bit more in detail of number-wise, a new plan and the current plan that exists. But I do appreciate the education that you've provided to me and other older members of the committee and to the board. So thank you. There's no questions. Is there another speaker in favor? Alderwoman. Madam Clerk.
Yes, we have Mr. Dan Clark.
Mr. Clark, please come on up again to testify in favor of 146. Just to be clear, was there anybody in opposition before?
We do not.
Okay. Mr. Clark, if we can swear you in one more time on this piece of legislation, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and none but the truth?
I do.
All right. Please proceed. And
Also, before you continue, we just wanted to make sure we can get that presentation from Mr. Brewer to give to the clerk. Thank you.
Am I good?
yes, you're good to go.
Okay. I just want to talk about fiduciary responsibility. As Alderman Ryan kind of brought up before, it was mentioned by the mayor's office, FRP has the best interests of the city. Let me just go over the definition of fiduciary responsibilities from the U.S. Department of Labor. The primary responsibility of fiduciaries is to run the plan solely in the interest of participants and beneficiaries and for the exclusive purpose of providing benefits and paying plan expenses. Fiduciaries must act prudently and must diversify the plan's investments in order to minimize the risk of large losses. This is exactly why we're here. Those statements are exactly why we're here. These are the problems we've had from John Kemper, who went down at a fire on 4th of July 2017, died on the 12th of that month, and then we had to fight to get the benefit for his family because he didn't die at the fire scene. It's things like that that these members want to take control of their own system. It isn't just about, yes, we know that FRS is going to make more money, we're going to have a healthier plan, which actually is better for everybody. It's better for taxpayers, it's better for us, but it's these things of this nature. We're talking about making changes for the age 55 requirement. This is a trustee right here. If that's an issue, he can bring up those issues. Moving on, there was something brought up that there was a conflict of interest of a set of trustees managing two different systems. If you look up PSRS Peers, it is a teachers organization here in Missouri that about almost 78 years ago took the teachers and then everybody else that works in the school, whether they be cafeteria workers, janitorial workers, they did exactly this. They took both systems, put that money together, and then have benefit from it. For about 78 years that's happened. So I'm not sure that that conflict of interest exists here in this state because it is being done. And you can look up their site. They've definitely benefited investment-wise from that. It's a larger pool of money. To speak on Director Payne's idea of it would make more sense for FRS to go underneath FRP, well, when the court ruled that they didn't have to stay in FRS anymore, the one thing they did rule is FRS has to exist. And it's going to exist for a long time. It has to exist until that last member dies or that last beneficiary dies. You're talking about a long time that's going to be in existence, a long time of paying two systems. As we've looked up throughout the country, St. Louis firefighters are currently the only group of employees in the whole country that are in two active systems, or two systems, one's not active anymore. No one else in the country is going to have to go, I'm going to go to FRS and figure out what this many years of my retirement's going to be, and then I'm going to go to FRP and figure out what these years of my retirement's going to be, and then I'm going to have to figure that out on my own, how I should direct my retirement. We are the only group in the country that's doing this. It makes no sense. I think everything else has been said. I think John did a great job of explaining the benefits of this, and I hope we can get you guys' vote. I appreciate your time.
All right. Any questions from committee members for Mr. Dan, Sergeant Senior Clark Hubbard? Alderman Keys?
No, I don't have any questions, but I certainly am appreciative of all of the participants today who have given a very valuable information. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Alderman Velasquez.
No questions. Thank you, Mr.
Alderwoman Tonye.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. No questions.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Clark, as well. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody else in favor for 146?
We do not.
All right. Well, with that, Alderman Ryan, before you go, do anybody have any questions for the bill sponsor, Sergeant Senior? Or did anybody have any follow-ups on Board Bill 146 that spoke? Director Payne, Casey, Milbrook, Dan.
If I may, thank you, Mr. Chair. When I hear discussions about having control of your own destiny and your old benefit, I did want to point out this is not a 401k. This is a pension program. Pension program is established by ordinance where the benefits are set. So if the market were to crash, and we had to, and which is, it's happened before, we can do it again. What happens to the benefits of the members? They're set. The benefits don't change because they're set by ordinance. What happens to the contributions of the members? That doesn't change either because that's also set by ordinance. Percentage of pay, that's what you get. What changes is the contributions of the city or the taxpayer. That's where the risk is. And so basically what the city is doing, providing the benefit and covering the risk of the system. That's what it's doing. And I just want to make sure that when we talk about pensions, that's what we're talking about. That's separate from 401ks where you are in charge of your own portfolio and all that kind of thing. But that's what is important to point out, and I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. I will have the bill sponsor come up and just go before I allow you to have the very last words. Any questions of the bill sponsor, starting with in seniority, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
Thank you. I have no questions.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Tanya.
No questions.
No questions for myself. Alderman Orion, you may proceed on Board Bill 146.
Thank you, Vice Chair Aldridge, and I want to thank everyone who took the time out of their day to come here and advocate for either side of this issue. I know it's a really important issue in front of us, and I want to thank Casey for being on the other side of the discussion from me, but we've had really solid discussions on the whole thing, and I wish that every piece of legislation that I worked on, the people that I disagreed with were A, as knowledgeable, and B, as polite to argue with as Casey has been. And with that, I'm going to hold this until next week.
All right, with that, the Alderman has decided to hold Board Bill 146 to next week, and he will make his way back on over here so he can take chair, or he don't have to, but you know.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair, for handling that for me. At this point, we have no resolutions for review. Are there any announcements? Okay, please proceed.
And since we have a few minutes, I want to make a public announcement to Alderwoman Keys and thank her for all of her ongoing efforts with the travesty that has happened down at the Heritage House. I know a lot of really important people to the community have called the Heritage House home. It's a beautiful property, and it's so sad to see what it's going through. Alderwoman Keys, I want to thank you again for your ongoing efforts. Of course, offer my support any way I can in their transitioning now. I know we can't just go by what we hear in the public. We all sit in these positions, so we know it's way bigger of a story than we see in the paper. So again, thank you, and if there's anything I can do to help and support you, please let me know.
Thank you so much for that. I am actually here in one of the hotel rooms right now, waiting to go back downstairs to continue the engagement with these seniors here. You know, it really, this is a bad thing that happened, but the fellowship that we're seeing among our seniors, they're meeting neighbors that they never knew were in the same 19-story building with them, and they've made some new friends. We are working with a myriad of social service agencies and health care providers to make sure that they have everything that they need. And it's truly sad that, you know, some of the stories that are coming out in the media, they haven't come to me, they haven't come to talk to people who can, you know, really give them the real story about what's going on here. And it's sad because our seniors are already distressed, and it almost seems cruel to hear some of the misinformation that they're receiving, which is so upsetting. So we're going to take care of them all the way through this process to get them settled. And Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, thank you so much for that recognition. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Alderwoman Keys. With that is the extent of our agenda today, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We stand adjourned.